the world has not seen a rupture like the way the United States and China would rupture since the outbreak of World War I in 1914. And as we know from looking at the archives at that time, financial markets and economic practitioners said, as the UK Secretary of the Treasury wrote to the Prime Minister, a feeling of paralysis. The future was so uncertain, not only how the war would develop, but what that might mean for the post-war economic order, that private actors didn't know what to do. And in a context in which global trade is more interconnected than ever before, and the world is more financialized than ever before, we believe that the paralysis could go much deeper than it did in 1914. So in that context, we think a bit about US interests that would be relevant. You know, in a context in which China is firing on US forces, or there has been a similar provocation, there will undoubtedly be a political temptation to throw the book at China, to use everything we have from the punitive toolbox. And I think reflecting on interests is important because it reminds us that we would have other relevant interests, and so would our allies and partners in that context, that would also deserve consideration. The United States would not have an interest in breaking the global financial system. The United States would not have an interest in causing mass unemployment, shortages of essential goods like medicines, and it would not have an interest in dividing its positions from that of its allies. At the same time, it would need to break its dependence on China's market. It would need to help its allies and partners break their own dependence on China's market. It would have to do what it could to preserve the fundamental position of the US dollar in the global trading and financial system, which affords so many benefits to American geopolitical power and American way of life. It would have to preserve whatever it could of a rules-based trading system so that when the dust settled, the United States and its partners could continue to trade with one another. So in this context, we then look at what prominent Chinese sources are saying about this problem, because since 2018, they have begun to work this problem set very hard. A lot of this commentary exists in the public domain. These are commentators who have held senior positions as financial regulators. They are professors of economic and finance at top party institutions, think tanks, universities. Many of them have served as the chief economists of major state banks. They are respected people, serious people, and they are engaged in a debate that we can peer into. So based on this analysis of the Chinese sources, we come to a couple of conclusions. First of all, China is worried that if a crisis broke out and we slammed them with sanctions, there would be some degree of risk to China's financial stability. This has been a top focus for Xi Jinping over the last 5 or 6 years, and it will likely continue to be. On the other hand, we detect growing confidence that China is rapidly building resilience to this sanctions playbook. And as China builds resilience, we detect a clear sense of growing confidence that this initial shock is something that China could survive. And indeed, if China did survive, and then US forces began to falter in a kinetic fight, the United States' paramount position on the global stage could be badly undercut. China's assumption, in other words, is that it has reached a position so central to global supply chains that most neutral countries would feel no choice but to keep trading with China, even through a sanctions regime or a blockade, if necessary by breaking through breaking away from the dollar-based payment systems upon which most of international trade is settled, and if necessary, finding indirect supply chains to continue to trade with China. So based on that rather grim diagnosis, we set about thinking about alternative ideas that might strengthen deterrence because they're drawn from China's own ideas of where its vulnerabilities might lie, as well as ideas for a contingency plan that might advance all, not just some, of our relevant interests.